3 kilometers below the frozen Antarctic Ocean, a wooden ship rests in perfect silence. Its name is still readable on the hull. Endurance. Lost for over a century. But this isn't a story about a shipwreck. It's about the 28 men aboard it, and the one impossible promise their leader kept. Not a single one of them would die. Welcome back to the channel. Picture the most hostile ocean on Earth. Waves as tall as buildings, winds screaming past 100 kilometers an hour, water so cold your blood begins to freeze, and drifting mountains of ice that can crush a ship like a matchbox. Now imagine being stranded out here not for days, not for weeks, but for nearly 2 entire years. No radio, no rescue, no map that matters. This actually happened over a century ago, and the man at the center of it was a British explorer named Ernest Shackleton. His obsession was simple and terrifying: test the absolute limits of human endurance. So that's exactly what he named his ship. Twice before, he'd tried to conquer Antarctica. Twice, the ice had turned him back. Now, in 1914, he wanted more. Not just to reach the continent, but to cross the entire thing on foot, something no human had ever done. He called it the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. The mission was so dangerous that finding a crew was the first battle. Legend says he ran an advertisement. Its words were brutally honest: low pay, bitter cold, months of darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. And yet thousands of men applied. Shackleton chose 27 of them. He'd spent 4 years planning this. But the timing was cruel. As the expedition prepared to leave, World War I erupted across Europe. Shackleton offered his ship and crew to the war effort immediately. The reply came straight from the top: proceed. So they did. On the 8th of August, 1914, the Endurance left England. For 4 months they sailed south to Argentina, then South Georgia Island. On board were 28 men and nearly 70 powerful sled dogs. In December, they turned toward the Weddell Sea and aimed at Antarctica. For 46 days, the ship pushed deeper into the ice. They were just 1 day from the coast. 1 single day. Then, on the 19th of January, 1915, the sea betrayed them. The pack ice thickened around the hull in places, 18 feet deep. The Endurance no longer had the power to break through it, and the ice was too weak to walk across safely either. They were trapped roughly 130 kilometers from their goal. At first, everyone assumed it was temporary. It wasn't. The crew tried to saw the ship free by hand. 300 tons of wood dragged across the ice inch by inch. After days of brutal labor, they'd moved it barely 300 meters. Then it stuck fast again. This time for good. By mid-February, Shackleton made a hard decision. They would stop fighting and let the ice carry the ship. Maybe, when the season turned, the pack would crack open. So the Endurance became a floating winter home in a white desert. And here's where Shackleton's real genius showed itself. He knew the true enemy wasn't just the cold, it was despair. So he built a routine. He kept everyone busy and together. They played football on the ice. They held debates and sing-alongs. They cut each other's hair. They cooked. They laughed. Officers and sailors did the same chores side by side. Morale stayed high because their leader refused to let it fall. But nature had other plans. In spring, the ice began to move. Instead of cracking apart, the giant floes started crushing together. Millions of tons of ice began squeezing the wooden hull. The crew dug frantically to free her. For a while it held. Then one night in July, a deep groan came from below. The ship lurched hard to one side. By morning, the rudder was gone. 7 months trapped, and now 2,000 kilometers from any human. No contact, no hope of rescue, only one man to believe in. By October, the pressure returned like a slow-motion earthquake. A wave of ice tilted the Endurance 30 degrees in seconds. Water began forcing its way through the cracking timbers. The crew pumped and worked through the night, but it was over. On the 27th of October, Shackleton gave the order: abandon ship. They hauled out the boats, the food, the dogs, the tents. Then they stood on the ice and watched their home die. The floes slowly crushed the Endurance and swallowed her whole. 28 men now lived on a drifting sheet of frozen ocean. Shackleton set his sights on land hundreds of kilometers away, but the ice was too broken to march and too dangerous to sail. So they made camp on the floe itself and let it drift. For months they lived on a slowly moving island of ice. It cracked beneath their tents. It changed direction without warning. They hunted seals and penguins just to survive another week. By February 1916, they had been stranded for over a year. Rations dropped to almost nothing, sometimes a single biscuit a day. In one of the hardest moments, they had to shoot the dogs. Animals they'd grown to love became their only food. Then the drifting floe changed course, away from their planned island. Storms battered them, temperatures crashed, frostbite crept in. Finally, in April, they launched their 3 small lifeboats. After days fighting the sea, they reached solid ground, Elephant Island. For the first time in 16 months, they stood on real land. But their relief didn't last long. The island was barren, no food source, no shelter, and absolutely no one coming. Rescue would never find them here. Shackleton knew it. The nearest help was a whaling station 1,300 kilometers away, across the deadliest stretch of ocean on the entire planet. So he made a decision that sounded like suicide. He'd take 1 lifeboat and 5 men and sail for it. On the 24th of April, 1916, they pushed off. They faced waves reaching 90 feet into the sky. No GPS, no compass they could trust. Only the sun and stars. Every man was soaked, freezing, and half-starved for 16 days. Then, against all odds, they spotted South Georgia Island. But the storm had driven them to the wrong side. Between them and rescue stood 4,000-foot mountains uncharted. No one had ever crossed the interior of that island. With no climbing gear, Shackleton and 2 men started up anyway. For 36 hours straight, they climbed through ice and cliffs. At one point, they slid down a slope just to survive the descent. Finally, they staggered into the whaling station and shocked everyone. The men there couldn't even recognize the ragged strangers. These skeletons were the explorers, lost for a year and a half. But Shackleton wasn't finished. 22 men were still on Elephant Island. He tried to reach them again and again. The ice blocked him each time. 3 rescue attempts failed. He refused to give up. On the 30th of August, 1916, he finally broke through. From a distance, he saw smoke rising from the island, a signal fire. He didn't know how many of his men were still alive. He counted them as the boat drew closer. One by one, every single man, all 22, alive. He had left England on the 8th of August, 1914. 2 years and 22 days later, he brought them all home. He never crossed Antarctica. He never even reached the mainland. 3 expeditions, 3 failures to hit his actual goal. And yet this failure made him a legend forever. Because leadership isn't measured by the goal you reach. It's measured by the people you refuse to leave behind. For over a century, the Endurance stayed hidden in the deep. Then, in 2022, explorers finally found her. 3,000 meters down, almost perfectly preserved. The name on the stern still clear after all these years. A silent monument to 28 men who should have died but didn't, because one leader made an impossible promise. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Could you survive 2 years on the ice? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.